everyone, thank you for joining me tonight. Tonight we're going to explore the British petroleum oil spill that had occurred in 2010. As many of you know, this was the worst oil spill in history, so this is going to make for a very interesting public relations case. We're going to deconstruct it one by one, see what practices were implemented, and we're going to see what else we could do in terms of recommendations for the company to see what could have been done differently during a disaster of that sort of magnitude. We're going to start off this presentation by giving a little background about what BP is. BP is headquartered in London, England, and the stock symbol for BP is BP plc. It operates in more than 80 countries and is one of the world's 6 leading oil and gas companies. The company operates in all areas of the oil and gas industry, including exploration and production, refining, distribution, marketing, petrochemicals, power generation, and trading. It also has renewable energy interests in biofuels and wind power. Each day, British Petroleum produces more than 3.2 million barrels of oil that is sold in more than 17,000 British Petroleum gas stations throughout the world. The company BP was founded by William Knox de Courcy in 1908, but was originally named the Anglo-Persian Oil Company since the company's first oil discovery originated in Persia. In 1935, it became the Anglo-Iranian Oil Company, and in 1954, British Petroleum. Key players in the company include Robert Dudley, CEO, Dr. Brian Gilvary, CFO, and Bob Fire, Executive Vice President of Salary and Operational Risk. British Petroleum's business goal is to be a focused oil and gas company that delivers value over volume safely and responsibly. We're now going to talk about the statement of problem for what was the worst oil spill in history. On April 20th, 2010, British Petroleum experienced the largest accidental oil spill in history that left 11 workers dead, 17 injured, and a total of 210 million gallons of oil flowing uncontrollably into the Gulf of Mexico for 87 days. The spill was a result of the explosion of BP's oil rig, Deepwater Horizon, which was located roughly 41 miles off the coast of Louisiana. Although the rig was owned by BP, it was operated by Transocean, one of the world's largest offshore drilling contractors. The months-long oil spill caused extensive damage to marine and wildlife habitats, as well as fishing and tourism industries along the entire Gulf Coast. NOAA closed commercial and recreational fishing in affected federal waters, and Louisiana Governor Bobby Jindal declared a state of emergency after oil slicks reached the Louisiana coastline. It's estimated that the fishing industry lost roughly $2.5 billion in the months following BP's oil spill. The Gulf region supports over 400,000 travel industry jobs, generating $34 billion in revenue annually. During the time of the spill, it was made public by the U.S. Travel Association that the economic impact on the region's tourism could exceed approximately $23 billion over a 3-year period. In addition to the catastrophic impact on local economies and the environment, there was also a catastrophic impact on BP's public perception. The media and federal government immediately responded to criticize BP following the spill. President Obama made a statement that the explosion could have been a result of corporations like BP taking shortcuts that compromise safety, and the nation will make BP pay for the damage that it has caused. Obama's criticizing statements was the beginning of what caused months of bad press and public backlash attacking BP from all angles. According to the Flame Index, which reviews data every second from more than 12,000 news sources and ranks 1,000 companies based on the coverage they receive, BP spent 61 days in the top 10 most covered stories, and 2 days as the top story in the media. These stories highlighted the economic and environmental impact caused by the spill, and the tragedy of those who lost their lives aboard the Deepwater Horizon oil rig. As a result of months of bad press and criticizing statements from politicians, BP experienced major financial impacts. BP's stock price fell by 52% in just 50 days on the New York Stock Exchange, going from $60.57 per share on April 20th, 2010, to $29.20 a share on June 20th, 2010, resulting in a total value loss of $105 billion. There were also multiple protests at BP service stations across the United States, which resulted in a reduction in sales between 10 and 40%. In addition to a loss of stock value in sales, the U.S. government fined BP over $18 billion in settlements and claims. Following months of bad press, BP's communication goal should be to convince key audiences that the company is committed to restoring the environment following the spill. It should also influence potential shareholders to purchase BP stock while retaining existing shareholders, due to the significant decrease in stock value during the oil spill. The company should also set the goal of regaining public trust and protecting the brand image of BP. Now, in order to do this research, there are several pieces of methodology that can be implemented. From a qualitative point of view, to address the above research goals, BP will first need to conduct a series of investigations to identify what caused the Deepwater Horizon disaster. Investigations should include in-depth interviews with survivors on the oil rig, as well as with key executives within BP. The result of these investigations will lead to a consistent story about what happened during the night of April 20th, 2010, aboard the Deepwater Horizon oil rig. Second, BP will also need to assess stakeholder attitudes and perceptions during the oil spill through hosting a series of community discussions, press conferences, and shareholder meetings throughout the Gulf Coast that specifically listen to the public's concerns and address what's being done to meet them. BP will also need to assess stakeholder attitudes and perceptions during oil spills through conducting a series of focus groups and telephone polling in Alabama, Mississippi, Louisiana, Texas, and Florida, which were the states most affected by BP's oil spill. Telephone polling efforts will achieve a response rate of 1,000 people. Now, from a quantitative point of view, to be eligible for telephone polling and focus groups, respondents must be 18 and over. Subjects in the focus groups will consist of 300 people, evenly divided between shareholders, local residents, and workers in the hospitality and fishing industries. A third-party research firm will conduct the survey over a 4-day period of time. Secondary research will include tabulating positive and negative media coverage. BP will need to continuously monitor local and national media outlets and systematically organize the different mentionings of its oil spill. BP will also need to use the Flame Index, which reviews data every second from more than 12,000 news sources, and ranks 1,000 companies based on the coverage they receive in order to establish and identify what's being said in the media and whether the campaign is having an effect. BP can also research oil disasters from other oil companies, such as ExxonMobil, and assess how it handled the oil spill. To develop this understanding, BP can research oil disaster and sustainability case studies published on the NOAA website, ExxonMobil website, and in scholarly journals. Lastly, BP can review previous news articles on past major oil spills where the company's stock prices eventually recovered. Now that we've identified the appropriate research and research methodologies to assist us in our communication campaign, we're going to discuss the situation analysis and the strengths, weaknesses, opportunities, threats, and strategic implications of a campaign of this sort. For strengths, first of all, BP has created multiple task forces committed to environmental and economic restoration of the Gulf. Second, the company has previously held a good reputation with the public and shareholders. Third, due to the size of the company, they are able to withstand large lawsuits and fines without going bankrupt. Fourth, under the Coast Guard's direction, the company has coordinated with federal and state agencies as well as nonprofits to minimize the amount of oil that reached the Gulf shoreline. Fifth, the company has invested over $14.3 billion towards environmental and economic restoration. And lastly, BP has a network of 100,000 people and 6,500 vessels that are dedicated to Gulf restoration. BP also has several weaknesses. First, the company doesn't regularly use or maintain its social media channels and has been rather silent during these oil spill crises. Second, the company has had too many voices speaking on behalf of it in the media, when really only one delegated spokesperson should be handling all media inquiries in order to create a consistent story. Third, former CEO Tony Hayward made a statement to the media, "I want my life back." Many Americans felt this to be cold and insensitive to the fact that 11 people lost their lives aboard the Deepwater Horizon oil rig. Hayward also resigned shortly after the spill, sending an indirect message of BP's competency handling the response efforts. BP also has several opportunities. Although BP owned the Deepwater Horizon oil rig that exploded, it was operated by Transocean. This creates the opportunity to not take 100% of the blame in this situation and deflect some of it to Transocean. Second, there's an opportunity here to correct false or exaggerated facts created by politicians and the media. Third, there's an opportunity to improve their image within the United States, the world, and the oil industry. Fourth, there's an opportunity to show commitment towards economic and environmental restoration efforts. And fifth, there's an opportunity to share lessons learned from the Deepwater Horizon oil spill with other oil companies to ensure such accidents don't take place in the future. BP has many threats. With an accident of this magnitude, BP is an easy target for the media. In addition, the name British Petroleum suggests that it's a foreign company. The United States has a tendency to be more harsh towards foreign companies operating in U.S. waters, capitalizing on U.S. resources, especially when there's a mistake involved. Third, due to the company's large size, the public thinks that it's greedy and pushes people around, under the concept of corporate greed. Fourth, politicians like President Obama are continuously bashing BP's image by suggesting that the company is taking shortcuts around safety to make additional profit. In reality, BP's Deepwater Horizon oil rig had an outstanding safety record, with no workplace injuries for more than 7 years. And last of all, the oil spill can have detrimental effects to the environment years later. In other words, there could be effects that have not yet surfaced that BP is completely unaware of. There are several strategic implications to the SWOT analysis described above. Although BP has the strength of being a big company and financially withstanding a lawsuit, settlements, and government fines, its size also hurts it because the public perceives the company as greedy, only interested in profits, and therefore able to pay the maximum possible in damages. The second implication is many people are unaware of Transocean's involvement in the spill. This is an opportunity for BP to communicate that the oil rig was owned by BP but operated by Transocean. It's also an opportunity for the company to communicate that although it was operated by Transocean, the company takes full responsibility and is committed to economic and environmental restoration. BP's objectives should be the following. By December 31st, 2010, place at least 20 stories in the media that cover what BP is doing to restore economic and environmental damage to the Gulf. Second, by March 31st, 2015, BP should ensure that at least 80% of media coverage is accurately and consistently portraying what mechanical failures caused the explosion of Deepwater Horizon. Lastly, BP should increase spill updates and communicate with stakeholders by 30% by March 31st, 2010. BP would also have several key audiences in a campaign like this. The first identified audience would be male and female BP shareholders who are college educated. Second, residents of the Gulf Coast. And third, workers in the fishing and tourism industries. An additional recommended audience would be local and regional and national regulators who are elected officials, and BP employees and employees of other companies in the oil industry. The reason why employees would be a key target audience is at the end of the day, they are the ones who are out there talking about the company and what it's doing with restoration efforts, both for the environment and economically. What you're looking at is some of the completed messages that BP used in its communications campaign. What we're going to discuss is some of the recommended messages that we would use. For example, President Obama mentioned in his speech that BP has taken shortcuts around safety to become more profitable. This is definitely not true. It's important for the public to understand that the Deepwater Horizon oil rig had a reputation for safety, and they didn't have a single worker injury in more than 7 years. The explosion resulted due to mechanical failures and judgment, not any shortcuts that were taken to avoid safety, as politicians like President Barack Obama pointed out in his speech. Another recommended message would be the fact that BP owned the well, but it was operated by Transocean and contracted with Halliburton. Although we take responsibility for the tragic accident that occurred, we look forward to working with these companies to address how we can work together from preventing this from happening in the future. Here are some of the completed and recommended strategies of British Petroleum's communications campaign. One completed strategy would be to obtain positive publicity on BP's corporate social responsibility efforts, and another completed strategy would be to update target audience on the oil spill and what's being done to restore the Gulf Coast economically and environmentally. One recommended strategy would be to take an authoritative approach about what's being said online about BP and the oil spill. Here are a few of the tactics that were used in British Petroleum's public relations campaign. As you can see, one completed tactic is to conduct media interviews and press conferences between the CEO of BP and all major media outlets to obtain positive publicity. Another completed tactic is to post continuous updates on company websites and provide the public with the resources needed to understand the extent of the Gulf oil spill and what's being done to restore the Gulf Coast economically and environmentally. However, one thing that we noticed didn't occur in the British Petroleum Public Relations Plan was the use of social media. A recommended tactic, therefore, would be to use social media to monitor online chatter and take an authoritative approach in shaping online perceptions. Lastly, there are several ways that this could be evaluated. The campaign could be evaluated through public perception of BP 1 year following the spill. Another evaluation tactic could be to measure how much the public knows about BP's CSR efforts, also known as corporate social responsibility efforts, through online surveys and social media engagement. A third way to evaluate would be to continue to tabulate media coverage to determine if the story has declined in news rankings or top stories. And lastly, another way to evaluate would be to look at the New York Stock Exchange prices to determine if communication campaign influences shareholders and purchasing decisions. The success of this campaign can be directly correlated to whether or not the New York Stock Exchange price goes back up in value. And that concludes our presentation on British Petroleum's oil spill on the Gulf Coast and the deconstruction of the company's public relations campaign. Stay tuned for sources used in this project. Thanks very much, and have a great day.